this episode of Raw with Uma flips the script because I'm not the one asking the questions. Sharat Lal, who has become a fast friend who I met through LinkedIn just last year, invited me onto his podcast, How to Live. He's been hosting it since 2021, always audio only. But for the first time, he's decided to film an episode, and I'm so honored to be in it with him. We went deep into the beauty pageant that shaped my mission, into what grief taught me when I left tech, and into what it means to build something on your own. With all the money fears, ego clashes, all of it. So it's raw, vulnerable, and unfiltered in a way I've never quite been before. And if you have ever asked yourself, who am I when the title goes away? This one's for you. So I hope you'll watch it, feel it, and I hope it stirs something in you.
I am very excited about today's topic. How do we take a cause that we are passionate about and make a meaningful contribution through it? We have none other than Uma Balasingham to talk about this. Uma has championed women's empowerment right from when she worked in a full-time Fortune 500 company to now when she does it full-time. We're going to talk to Uma and try and create a playbook on how we take a cause and do something meaningful out of it. Uma, welcome to the How to Live podcast. Today we're going to look at how do we take something meaningful. I know you've taken something meaningful and made a huge impact through it. So how can people take causes that they're meaningful, that are important to them? But before we get there, I'd love to understand, you've championed women's empowerment. How did that start? What created the interest in this, if there's a story behind it?
I have to go way back to when I was 25. And for the fun of it, my best friend from university, her name is Gauri, and I decide that we would participate in a beauty pageant. I haven't told this story publicly before. So the cutoff age is 25. So we're like, hey, let's just try it out. So we treat it very nonchalantly and we show up and somehow we get through all the rounds, as weeks go by. And in one of the sessions to prep everyone who made it to that round so far, before you get to the finals, there was this session about how to dress for work, how to get your resume ready, I, as a brown woman and a dark-skinned woman that grew up in Malaysia, I didn't learn much from my mother except that I should always use moisturizer, and she even gave me Fair and Lovely because she thought I was too dark, And I grew up in a country that likened beauty to being fair-skinned, and I would see friends that would get attention from boys being fairer skinned than me as well. So that was basically everything I knew about that. Moisturize your skin, use Fair and Lovely. And then I get to this beauty pageant, and in this round, they teach you like you should wax your arms and all of that, right? And as I was going through this experience, the one thought that came into my mind was like, I wonder how many women out there like me who are brown and unseen who will never get to be in these rooms. And I thought, could I ever someday do something to get them into these rooms? That was the start of it.
What a powerful story. So if I understand right, you realize that being yourself, there's a beauty that you can explore, which can give you confidence. And you got that experience, which was authentic to yourself. And you felt, I would like to bring this to so many other brown women who may not feel the beauty in themselves.
Yeah, I certainly felt good about myself. I don't know about authentic, Sharat, because I'm looking at it in hindsight, right? 20 plus years later, you're
without
like, well,
needing to be someone else, without needing to be fair, you could be
I mean,
in your brown skin.
I had no
but still
idea who I was then.
Yeah, okay.
But for that period of time, I only wore pants because I was an engineer. Then I had my first job in sales. I worked at IBM, and all I saw around me were men. And also, as an engineer, it's just much more convenient to wear pants as you do labor work, right? So I never knew how to actually dress for myself. And that's part of what you learn in the beauty pageant, how to use makeup, how to dress professionally. And none of these skills are taught in school, right? Like, so you just kind of figure your way out. So yes, I thought I felt good having that information and then applying that knowledge. I felt better about myself. I felt more confident. I felt like I could fit in versus standing out as, the brown woman who's got hair on her arms.
And once you had that realization and you said, look, I want other people to experience this, how did you go about channeling that energy?
I didn't do anything about it, to be honest, because I was so busy pedaling hard.
A 25-year-old going through your,
Yes, I was determined never to end up like my parents. We didn't have a lot of money. My mom raised us on a salary of what would have been $500 then. There were two of us. My dad wasn't working. And so, 100 of the 500 went to my piano lessons, right? Then I wanted to go to music school at age 15 after I finished grade 8. And, good Indian parents said, nope, doctor, lawyer, engineer, those are your choices. So that was my number one goal. So while this thought came into my mind, I did nothing about it because I had bigger priorities to take care of myself. And I was maniacally focused on getting money. And that meant I had to progress quickly in the workplace.
So it was money achievement at that stage as a 25-year-old, given the context you were in. When did this image and thought come back to you later and inspire you to do something towards the women you were thinking about?
So you navigate the workplace, from Malaysia, I came to Singapore in 2006, and I kept getting bigger and bigger jobs. And then I noticed, not so much men versus women or the different treatments, just my own experience of getting comments like, every time I said I wanted to be CEO, I would get one of two replies. You're too ambitious or you're very ambitious. Right? And I thought, really, like, should I be rethinking this? And then I started putting out into the universe about, I wonder if others feel the same way that I do. And in 2015, a colleague in a Lyft ride said to me, you really should read this book, because she was sensing my energy. And I think that's one of the key takeaways. It's like when you start putting energy out there about what you're seeking, somehow people, things come to you. So she said, you should read Lean In. And I was like, what's this book? I went and got it. This is 2 years after Lean In was released. And Lean In is a book written by Sheryl Sandberg, previously the COO of Meta. And she wrote this book because she was curious about why, after many years of progress, and we can define progress in different ways, ability for women to drive in some countries, go to school in some countries, starting to get leadership positions in the more matured economies, it all suddenly came to some form of halt. And she was curious why. So she wrote the book. I couldn't put the book down, and it explains so many of these experiences that I was going through, like, you're too ambitious or you're very ambitious. I then understood, oh my gosh, I wasn't the only one, and I can do something about it.
It was such a powerful book. I remember even as a man reading that book, it just opened up a different way of understanding women. And once you read that book, it kind of made you understand that these things are happening to you. It's been happening to many other women.
Yeah.
And you'd had those experiences earlier. What did you do then to try and help some of the other women?
So I tried to, in a very unpolished way, bring women together into a meeting room where I was working. And I couldn't even explain why I wanted to bring them together. I was just like, hey, let's talk about our experiences at work, and then back then, this is what, 2015, right? It's odd. I didn't know how to moderate a conversation. I just knew like I wanted to share this knowledge without shoving a book in their face, And I wanted to hear what was their experiences. Could we draw any parallels? Could we support each other? So that was, I think, the beginning of this community. Now that I'm saying it out loud to you,
Yeah.
right? It was in that meeting room, and I know exactly what meeting room it was in the office of this company I used to work for, EMC. So
cool. So it was this awkward meeting, but there may have been something interesting that came out in this awkwardness, which told you, yes, this is something worth pursuing. And that's when you kind of took it further. What was it that you saw there?
to be honest, it was the question that my mentor asked me. And it was, what would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? And he would preface that by saying he didn't know the answer to that question himself. And from the 4-Hour Workweek book, he was, distilling it down to me. And he said, look, most people approach life this way. Every time you achieve X, you do Y. When I get my first $100,000, I'm going to put a down payment to that house. When I get the next $50,000, I'll think about getting married, whatever that is for anyone. And so instead of always having your Y follow your X, ask yourself, what would you do if you had all the time and money in the world? And so I said out loud to him, I was like, oh, it's got something to do with women. I don't know what, but it's got something to do with women. I want to do something related to women. I want to help women. I just don't know how. And I am no expert on gender or anything. So I blurted it out loud. And then coming back to putting it out to the universe, I get this email because I'm on the INSEAD mailing list. And there's a Lean In Singapore event. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like Lean In is here. And I go to this, and that's where I meet Helen Deuce. She's got a few people in the room, I'd say 80 to 100. And these are people who have found Lean In through a Google search. She had registered the chapter because she had benefited from peer-to-peer mentorship at INSEAD with a group of women and had read the book. And she said, look, I don't know how to do this. I'm looking for help. That's why I'm doing this event. So if anyone's interested to help me, just put down your name card. There was a bunch of name cards. She randomly picks 5. I was one of the 5.
Oh, wow. Talk about signs.
Yeah. And I was the only one who was left, after a year or so. And yeah, we built it together. And then Helen pursued her passion to build her own company. So she stepped out during the pandemic. And, we had a year of failing well, I would say, of testing what we thought the community wanted and formats that we thought would work that, I call it failing well because we learned so much. And then from the second year onwards, we figured out a format that I'm still using till today.
Wow.
And so you got to test a lot in your first year of anything.
Thank you for sharing that, Uma. I'm just going to distill some lessons for our listeners. I loved what you said, what your mentor asked you. If you had all the time and resources, what would you do? I think that's a good way to figure out what is important to you. And I also love the honesty with which you said that I wasn't completely sure, but I knew it was in the women area.
Yeah.
And then the second lesson I loved, when you know the area you're after and you manifest it in some way, the universe is going to send you signs. Whether it was that email from INSEAD, whether it was being picked as one of those 5 people who are going to lead it. Through that, you found yourself not in a very perfectly structured way. You had an odd kind of meeting with women, but then you found yourself in some way to running the Lean In Singapore chapter.
Yeah.
Wow. And you talked about once you started running that chapter, you failed well. So I'd love to understand, there's an idealistic way that we get into these kind of causes, but there's always failures and things don't work right. So if you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced as you were creating this community.
I think every book and serial business person or entrepreneur will say this, but then you read it and like me, you go like, but I know better.
Yes.
And what they say is that in the first year, all your assumptions will go out the window, right? And even as now as a later stage entrepreneur, the same holds true, right? I think I know better, but not really. So yeah, that's why it's so important to fail well. And my definition of failing well is, do you know what you want to learn out of all the tests that you do, so that you're intentional about the testings, right? So you're going in knowing that it is going to be perfectly imperfect and you're going to make loads of mistakes, but you're making them intentionally so that you can come out with the learnings. So what are the outcomes of learnings that you want to get at the end of the year or out of every test that you do? I still apply it today. I applied it in corporate when I was doing 0 to 1 businesses, right? So that's really the definition of failing well. For example, we used to invite speakers. And one of the things we learned is that people love talking about themselves. So even though you said you had 15 minutes, they would take half an hour, and then that would just throw off our agenda. So the format we use now is no external speakers, unless it's just a panel and it's part of enhancing a theory. So there's illustration, but then we quickly go into a practice session so that women can come together and experience and talk together and do a little exercise together. So, you know, you learn these things and you can only find them out by experiencing them yourself, no matter how many people tell you otherwise. So you must experience the tests and learn from it. And that's really how you fail well in the first year.
I love that. I love that. And I love this whole thing of setting it up in such a way that you can extract lessons. So, for example, do we need a speaker to speak for 15 minutes or 30 minutes? What do we want them to talk about? So you know this is not work because of this reason, and you change that part. So like that, you set up various tests and you learn more about it. That's the way to learn. I love that approach of learning.
Yeah. And then when you're building communities or even a customer base, it's good to ask for feedback. So we ran a survey after, I think, 2 years. And one of the things that was so basic, but we took for granted, was how much they appreciated the networking before and after. So now we start at 6 and finish by 9:30 to 10. So the 6 to 7 is the networking. Then we start the event versus start the event immediately. And then we always stay back. The speakers always stay back so that people can network after.
That's so good. Learning along the way, seeing what's working, tweaking it till it works right.
Yeah.
Now, Uma, as you're doing this, you're operationalizing it, but you also started with a deeper purpose of, making sure that women get access to all this. How were you, once you got into it, how were you looking and measuring the impact that you had started with?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And sometimes when I say that we have a community of, at any one time, 6,000 to 7,000, and people go like, yeah, exactly. And I always say, actually, for me, it was never about the numbers, because the measure of impact and success was always, will one woman walk out of this event doing something differently? And I have held to that for 8 years. And the beauty of it is that even if it's one woman, she will have the ripple effect. I had a text message the other day about, I had so many texts because this week I did an event, our last event for Lean In for the year, and it was about navigating workplace politics. And I had so many women write. One wrote and said, I can't stop talking about your event. I know I told you there, but I even told my husband about it. Now he wants to come. This is the ripple effect that we create. And so I think if you can focus on your avatar, and for any, whether it's nonprofit or not, I run Lean In as a nonprofit. Who's your avatar? Who are you really serving? And I have always said one person does something differently. That's success. And it also informs what I invest in.
I love the concept of avatar. Maybe we talk more.
Yes.
So I first double click on the impact as people are listening. Impact need not be numbers. There's a lot of indirect impact. And I think when you see that one person coming back to you and you see that transformation, that makes you realize the impact that you're having. So I love that point. And the second one about having that avatar and creating things around that avatar. So if you can talk a little bit about the concept of avatar.
An avatar is your ideal customer profile, your ICP. And so I find that it's always good to give the avatar a name because it personalizes it. And ideally, you choose a name of someone you know that's the avatar and just use your first name. At Elevate, for our B2C model, my avatar, and also Raw with Uma, my avatar is Anita. And so everything I do, I ask, is this going to help Anita? Is this going to serve Anita? And so it also informs investment decisions. Like if someone on the leadership team for Lean In said, Uma, we need new banners because these banners are outdated. Then my question is, how does it help
Anita.
Exactly.
And for Anita, if I can double click on it, do you have like a detailed written out note of who Anita is, what she's doing? Do you have some mood board kind of a thing? Or you just have an understanding of who she is?
In the beginning for Lean In, nothing was written down. We weren't that organized at all.
Yeah.
So, but now, yes. What are her pain points? How is she consuming information? What are her struggles in life and in work? Does she feel like she's a hidden talent? Is she looking for visibility? Is she struggling with time management? Right? Does she get interrupted in meetings? Yeah.
Very cool.
And I think you can the best way to develop an avatar is to go speak to at least 3 and, prepare your questions of, based on the product that you're trying to deliver, get feedback on it.
Very cool. So now you're doing, let's talk about the Lean In. You're doing Lean In, there's 7,000 people, but that's your part-time. You have your main Fortune 500 company. Yes. You're an ambitious person doing very well. How are you juggling these two demands, managing time, managing your energy?
Yeah. I don't even know if I would call it part-time. It was almost like sometime. So yes. And I think it goes back to your why. And so many have wanted to be part of this journey, but have not, either discovered this wasn't their why, not part of the passion that they are aligned with, and they figured out other passions, or they simply are still discovering their why.
Yeah.
And I know my why, and, my why has always been, how many other unseen, hidden women that will never get to be in this room can come into this room, right? So, and that's why I do other things to try and scale what I've learned and any other wisdom, knowledge, etc. So knowing your why is so important, because when you do something in parallel to a full-time job, it is early mornings, late nights, and weekends that you put in the effort to do this. And so it cannot feel like, do I really have to, open my laptop and create this EDM or look at the Excel spreadsheet and see how many people registered for this event? We used to do everything manually. We didn't even have Eventbrite then, right? So people will respond via emails or Google Forms or whatever, right? So yeah, you do all of that work yourself in the beginning. And then as we grew, at one point we had like 200 volunteers. Then when you start to scale that way, one of the most important things as a founder is learning to let go. And only focusing on what you can do.
Yes.
And giving others, autonomy to do what they want to do. So one of the rules that Helen and I had comes from the book from Mark Manson on the subtle art of not giving a F-U-C-K. And so one of the first incidents is we would look at something and we were like, oh my gosh, there's a spelling mistake in this idiom. Should we say something or not? And we did that a few times, and then we caught ourselves and we said, look, how many times should we really be stepping in on something like this? How important is that? How does it serve Anita, for example? So we gave ourselves a rule. We said, all right, if it's not at least 3 bucks, we're going to let it go. So we had that rule.
Excellent. And as I think there's this thing of you're getting volunteers, you're scaling up. You also have the rules of letting go on certain things, like you said, not beyond 3 fucks. You let that go. But there's also these people are volunteering, and there's also a capability of managing this organization as you and Helen are stepping back. How do you measure capability among volunteers so that they can take leadership to the next level?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one. And I don't know if I found the answer to this question because when it comes to giving back, I think a lot of people appear to be motivated. And I think if you have a strong why, then your motivation is even more cemented. There's strong foundation to it. But capability is a big question mark because you don't really have a choice sometimes. Whoever can lend in their time, you got to be okay with whatever capability they come with, and be okay with a lot of imperfections. So that's one. Be okay with imperfections, focus on the outcome of making the impact, right? The second thing is, at one point, it is like running an organization. So you do come into, I don't know if you want to call it politics or, whispers, etc. At one point, we were told that it's becoming the Helen and Uma show. And we said, okay, we'll take a step back. Who would like to take a lead? And what we learned from that experience, which we actually took for granted ourselves, because Helen and I have been people managers and then leaders when you become managers of managers, is such an imperative skill to lead because these people are not on your payroll, so they don't actually have to listen to you. So how do you create a vision and then bring people along the journey? And that is not a skill that you practice and develop in a nonprofit and expect that to happen. You actually have to learn to do that, and it takes time.
That's such an important lesson.
Yeah.
As you're scaling up, these people are volunteering. So you would need people, especially at your leadership team, if you have a few people, with that skill level where they can influence, motivate that skill. They've done that. And it may not be the person who has the deepest why. The deepest why has a role to play, but that role could be, there's a mix of why as well as capability in figuring out the roles of people, because now it's starting to become like an organization and scaling that up.
Yeah.
And that becomes the next challenge.
Yeah. I think the why directly impacts the longevity of the person staying and continuing to do.
Understand.
Yeah. Capability is more shorter term without motivation.
Right.
So at that point in time, I can deliver the skill and do an event, which typically takes 2 months, 6 weeks to get off.
Okay. Cool. So you're doing this, and then a year back, you quit and you come full time into pursuing this cause. So if you can talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I was made redundant. Okay. And, it was a great, great journey in tech. Loved my career. And so, one of my biggest lessons this year is how important it is to grieve for anything that you love. And I don't know how many of us associate love to careers and work, but I absolutely loved my tech career. And I had this huge opportunity. I was a senior executive, and so by taking a redundancy, it gave me a financial runway. So I am privileged in that way, but I worked fucking hard to get there. But I just want to recognize that because I had the financial runway, and I don't have kids, right? So these are other considerations for other people. It allowed me to take a step back and to do what I really want to do. And so I am building the Elevate Group, and our mission is to uplift 5 million working women across Asia, and then eventually Asian women globally. And I'm partnering with Jingjing Liu, and we have 3 parts to our business. But yeah, one of the best things Jingjing and I did is to date each other before we went into this full time together. And I think anyone, just like in relationships, why shouldn't you date your founder, right? We're both founders. So co-founders, whatever term you want to use.
Very cool. So I'll just double click on one of the things that you said. You started something on your own because it was also, of course, a why, a cause, but also tactically right, because you had a good cushion. You did not have other dependents, not too many dependents on you, so you could do it. So it wasn't like, hey, I believe in this cause so much, I'm going to give everything up. So I think that's an important thing to look at. And then you found the right founder, co-founder in Jingjing, and you talk about dating. I'd love to understand that more. What was this dating with Jingjing like?
So firstly, I chose Jingjing out of a pure gut feeling. We didn't have any long-standing relationship. We never worked together. We have never done anything together. When she found out what I was going to build, she was excited. She wanted to give her input to it. So we had a few dialogue, and then something said to me like, I should ask her. And I think this is the stillness and space that when you invite that into your life, you can listen to the messages that the universe is sending you. And that was a very strong message for me because I just felt it so deeply inside me. Even my best friend was like, who is this woman? Like, we need to do a background check. Like, you can't just ask anybody to come do this with you. And I just it's like, no, I feel it. I'm just going to go with it. So I think sometimes it's really okay to listen to your instincts. Then our dating period looked like we would come together, talk about the business, okay, what would the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days look like? What's important? How might we brainstorm together? So we would spend a few hours a week. And that then evolved to us coming together to say like, okay, what do we like? What did we not like about working with each other? What do we observe, etc. Now, it was a very short period. It was less than 6 months of dating, but
that's still pretty long.
Yeah, it was still our mission of building something bigger if we came together that tied us together at the start. And one of the most revealing things for my first full year as a founder only without having a job is how important the founder's relationship is.
Absolutely.
And we've had ups and downs, a lot of downs, which gave us individually growth. It required us to go separately and do therapy and coaching and, whatever works for each of us. I have a therapist, just talking through things and, just really like being transparent with each other. And, there's always dynamics, like Jinjin's younger than me, so like she would put me on a pedestal in the beginning and she had to figure out a way to look at me eye to eye. So she had that to deal with. I had the, you are less experienced, therefore I know more. You should just listen to me. And I'm a manifesting generator from the concept of human design. There's four types of us. So I do many things. I'm a 4-lane highway, and she's a generator, 1-lane highway, do one thing and do it well. So, there's so many things that we had to learn about each other. We had a great advisor that brought us together to think about some questions and challenged each of us, So really uncomfortable moments throughout the year for both of us. And a lot of internal fighting with ourselves to come out on the other end. And I'd say this is going to be ongoing, but it's the foundation of any business that you want to build, I think, that no
100%.
one talks about often.
Thank you for sharing that. And as I'm understanding it, there are different personalities, there's different age. There's one looking up to the other kind of being the more senior person. And then you said you have to go out and do your work because you realize we're clashing. It's not working. Things are not working right. How did you realize that it's reached a stage that, look, it's not working. I need to really think about it. And what was your process? You said therapy, but if you can talk a little bit about your process of coming back in a different way after thinking about something.
I think everyone will experience this differently.
Yes.
For me, my body gets sick first. And it's not a normal flu. It's a lingering flu.
Yes.
And so the first time it happened, I took antibiotics for 20 days. The second time it happened, I knew this was something bigger. It's just actually not my body.
Yeah.
And something else is happening. And so I didn't take the antibiotics. And I happened to be away from Singapore. And that gave both of us space. And I said things that I didn't mean that caused her to pause and also reflect. And that's when she came out. Because I think, sometimes when it accumulates, it pushes you to a wall. So it did arrive to that stage where you feel like your back's up against the wall for you to go like, something's got to give. So we need to figure out what's going on here. And as with everything in life, it's never about the other person. It's always about you, right? So you got to go away and whatever works for you. For me, it was therapy. I started therapy a while back, but especially this year, it's a big year of change for me. I also dated therapists before choosing one.
That's very advisable. I completely
Yes.
agree with that.
And I think they all bring different things to the table. So I have 3 that I can go to, depending on the situation. So, I talked it out. And I think the most important thing about therapy is that you have to be brutally honest for the other person to help you.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't lay all your cards on the table
Agree.
and you don't give the absolute truths, because there's no judgment and we are all still filled with ego. I still have ego. But in therapy, if you really want to come out on the other side faster, although it takes time, you got to lay all your cards on the table. So can you actually do that?
It takes a long time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a long time and it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do it. But like you said, once you do it, you can start getting better understanding of yourself.
Yeah.
And right now, in the past 1 year, you're in a situation where the paycheck isn't coming. You have a new co-founder and you're trying to figure things out. And sometimes it's working well, it's clashing, but you're also trying to figure out life and your identity and you're going to therapy. During this entire process, as you're reflecting, what are you learning about yourself?
Firstly, my relationship with money. So my first week, not my first week, sorry. First time I ran out of toothpaste. After I left my job, my helper comes up to me. She's like, we got to buy new toothpaste. So should I just get you the same brand? Do you want another brand? And I said, hang on a minute. I traveled like 192 days a year. So I have a travel drawer. Makes it easy to pack. And I said, check the travel drawer. I bet I've got toothpaste that I've brought back from hotels, right? And then I looked at my phone. I'm like, who am I visiting this week? Which friends am I going to see? And I remember saying to myself, I bet they've got toothpaste. I bet they got extra and they're going to give it to me, so I don't need to buy toothpaste, right? So I tell this story to my friend, very close friend, on our walk. And she's like, you got to stop this. You got to go buy toothpaste because you're sending this message to the universe of scarcity. And you need to send a message of abundance. And this has been a conflict for me all year. You know, scarcity, abundance, like, and I'm walking the tightrope, and I still am. I did go and buy toothpaste, and I wanted to buy a really nice one, but then I got to the counter, and this very lovely 60-plus-year-old auntie convinced me I should buy the $2 Darlie toothpaste. And I'm like, universe, I don't know what you're telling me. Okay, I'll just get the Darlie. But I then, went out to get other stuff that I really wanted. I invested in this painting series in my house, which I slept over for 2 weeks. Had I been working, I would not have slept over it, And I really wanted it in my house, and I was like, no, I really want it. Like, should I be spending this much money when I'm not working? And I think it's a fine balance of, I have a death clock on my phone.
Wow.
So I have like 17,900 something days. I think I'm going to live till 95. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that are going to be making me happy. Yeah. I'm going to be grateful for that. Say my gratitude that I can. And then welcome more to come into my life.
So 2 things. One, we've got a message from Hilton that they want their toothpaste back. So many years you've been taking that
and
toothpaste.
All the other hotels.
And all the other hotels. Second, I just want to underline this point for folks listening. And I've seen it across where people who've done pretty well, they still have a huge cushion and they've left their job. This money thing comes up. Even though you might have a lot, we think about, oh, I'm not getting that paycheck, so should I be buying the toothpaste? Should I be not having the meal out? Should I be thinking about the coffee I have in a shop? All these things that you never considered come into mind. So that contraction starts happening, and that's a reality in some way. So I want to highlight that to people. Now, when you have that thing about money coming in, and there's of course the cause and stuff that you want to go towards. So there's always the temptation, hey, let me go back to work, or let me quickly commercialize it. How do you balance these things?
So I was actually supposed to go into the next job. And it was a very prominent role in a very prominent company. And then a restructure happened in that company. And they called me and said, look, it's not going to be what we talked to you about. And, would you want to accept it 2 levels below? And I said, no, thank you. So that was the first message.
From the universe. Yes.
Then something else came up and I was tempted again. I said, I'll do a 30-minute interview with the leader. Just so I could feel good that I went to it. I don't even know what I was trying to do. I was like, I'm just going to have a conversation. And I think I asked different questions to this interview that I never did before. For example, I asked, how do you plan to integrate a diverse candidate like myself into your organization? And I don't mean gender or race. I mean all of that plus I'm a multi-hyphenate. And this is still so much of a foreign concept. And I didn't get a good answer because I'm willing to bet this leader hasn't
thought about
need to deal with that.
Yeah, it doesn't need to.
Everyone does the job and there's nothing else. There's hobbies. So that was my second message.
I found that interesting. I've seen people talk about diversity, but I've never seen people talk about being a multi-hyphenate. I have multiple interests. I have multiple paths to myself. How can that be incorporated into work?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Because I don't want to go into any organization where I'm going to be questioned about my commitment, and I'd rather be measured to outcomes, right? I don't want to be like, oh, why didn't you show up to the office last week? Were you recording a podcast?
Yeah.
I am over that.
No, absolutely. You have so much to offer. Like, I get it.
So that was the second message. And then I took the leap and then made it official on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Gosh, it felt like jumping off a cliff.
Oh, man.
Because, LinkedIn is like the professional world online, right? So you're almost saying like, don't call me anymore. Yeah.
I'm not that important person you need to sell stuff to.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, I mean, that's another big dose of, reality is we all forget all the advantages we got. It's tied to the title we carried.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the business class travel, people greet you with the car. I remember one of my last trips to India, and in one of the cities, the team had come together, and there's a lot of them, and they're all in this restaurant, and I was slightly late. So I walk in to go have dinner, and there's this like long pathway in the restaurant before I get to the tables, because it's a big group. And as I'm walking, they all stand up. And you know what I did?
Madam Uma has arrived.
I looked behind me. I was like, oh, what are they standing up for? I looked behind me. And then like in a split second, I was like, oh my God, they are standing up for you. It's like, Uma, keep walking. So then I was like, oh, of course, I am the highest ranking leader, right? So it was a sign of respect, right? Nobody's standing up for me. Right? Yeah. So it's a dose of reality. Sure. And I think this is why it's so important to, I think the most important question in life is, who are you? And it's got nothing to do with all these external validations.
And what is your current answer to who you are?
Yeah, my current answer, thank you for phrasing that because it can change, is that I am a change agent. I'm a trailblazer. I'm usually the first to try and do something. I find energy in that. I'm a connector. I can usually connect people to anyone in 2 or 3 degrees. I'm an altruist. I care about social impact. And new for this year, a creator.
Of course.
I have never thought of myself that way, but I am writing now and creating content, and I love it.
How do you choose where you want to put your time? Because there's, of course, now the business you're creating, there are 2, 3 of them. There's commercializing, there's money, there's multiple parts to you. How do you figure out where to put your time?
The thing is that all my time outside of my personal time goes to one mission, right? And that is to uplift women. So for me, it's almost like it's one goal. It's just different vehicles. And so I don't know how I do it, but look, the best hack for me is to write down what I need to do and then time block it.
Right. Time blocking is great.
Like create invoice or pay invoice is time blocked. Write list for travel is also time blocked. So I time block everything. And yes, I am the person who never gets everything done a day. So I'm moving the time blocks.
But there's some starting point.
But it's always there. Because I find like if I don't time block my to-do list, it never happens.
Because that's even for folks who are trying to just go fully on their own. There's so much to do, and you can just put your time in so many things and realize you've not really achieved anything. So I guess there's that efficient time blocking where being efficient and seeing what we want to do and intentional.
Yeah.
But after a period of time, is there like a reflection that, oh my God, I've done so many of these things and I've just got caught up in the noise and now I need to shift and change and remove and simplify? How does that process work for you, especially in the past year?
It's what's important. So it's urgent and important.
The Eisenhower
Yeah.
metrics, yes.
And it's not urgent and important, right? So urgent and important is, okay, what's time sensitive? And why is it time sensitive? Because sometimes you create your own timelines and then you say it's time sensitive, but maybe it's not, right? And the flexibility with founders is that you can actually create your own timelines.
Yes.
And the biggest thing that Jingjin and I did this year, in addition to what I talked about earlier, is founders KPI. And our number one KPI is that we will always build the business around our lifestyle. And so our lifestyle has to come first, and then the business is built around it. So we don't work together Mondays and Fridays, for example. But if either of us wants to get stuff done, sure. We only come together Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and then we have other things that we do. So what's important? Number one. And the other thing is like taking the learnings, right? So the intentional learnings out of your first year. It's like, okay, what did we learn? What should we repeat? What should we not repeat? How do we pivot? I think if you're not pivoting at the end of year one, there wasn't enough learnings and you should go and get more learning. This is only my opinion.
This is the opinion for most startups, by the way.
Okay. Thank you for validating. You're more of an expert on this than I am. So if you know that you're going to pivot, then you prioritize the pivot moves to lay the new foundation. So that's where our energy is going now.
Very cool. I love that fact that you've earned it to design your life and then work can come around that. So I love that whole life design and then work fitting into that great concept. That's the trend I've noticed.
Yeah.
That as you get stillness, the universe points you in that direction.
Yeah.
And maybe I just click on that part where you are a high performer, you're on LinkedIn, you're everywhere. There's so much of noise around you. How do you get that stillness for the universe to talk to you? And how do you have that connection with that universe? Has it happened? Have you been intentional about it? Because that's been a theme across your life and career.
Yeah. I am a big fan of Oprah. I grew up watching Oprah. And so it has been ingrained in me. One of her biggest lessons is that your number one job in life is to figure out the biggest dream that the universe has dreamt for you.
Wow.
Because no matter what you think your dreams are, the universe has a bigger dream for you. And your number one job is to align yourself to that dream. And I'm of the opinion that you cannot do that without stillness, spirituality. For me, that's gratitude. Without space, right? And I think if you can sit still without any stimulations or distractions, it is the biggest thing to achieve in my opinion. And this has been a difficult year in so many ways, personally, professionally. For me, so many fighting moments with myself, but it is the best year because I have met more of myself than I ever have. And I think you can only show up to another person to the extent that you've met yourself. So if I want to meet 5 million women where they are and help them rise, I got to meet myself first. So that's the work that, I'm doing for me.
Such powerful, wise words. I have this last question, which I ask everyone. Uma, at the end of your life, how would you know you've lived a good life?
Oh, how will I know I've lived a good life. Okay. I actually did an exercise this year on what is my definition of a rich life. For example, it does not involve buying a house, but it does involve drinking great champagne and wine, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I am. That would be one of the things that I lived a rich life based on my definition. I lived well, meaning I was mobile, I was coherent, my mind was active, and I lived with the people that I loved that loved me back. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Uma, for sharing the past 1 hour with us and having this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.